in the process of this, so I'll talk as I'm working. What I've got here is my veneers, and I've cut 4 centimeters wide by pretty much 30 long, because I've seen a lot of rings made using this technique, but I want to try do a bangle. So I've had them in, this is hot water straight, or it was hot water straight out of the kettle, and they've been soaking for a good hour or so. I think that might help slightly, because depending on which instructions you read, some say to microwave your wood in water and some say to boil it, so doing it this way kind of best of both, I reckon. So I'm just using a glue bottle which is about 24 centimeters in circumference, and I'm looking to make my bangles about 23 in circumference, so getting them close should hopefully make it easier to actually bend them round all the way. I prefer to go a little tighter, but I'm kind of working with what I've got. Okay, so it's been a couple of days and all my wood seems dry, at least these are. Some of the woods still feel slightly, some of the rings even still feel slightly damp, so I have to leave them a little bit longer. But what I'll say is I've got myself a new wee toy. This is called the multi-sizer, and it kind of does what it says on the tin, really. It's a little kind of like a zip tie really, with ring measurements on it. So you put it down to the appropriate size, check it for fit, and then put it off. So it goes all the way down through the sizes. I've got a fat finger, so I'm a Z, but that covers all the sizes that I'm aware of at least, and it's going to make the ring process quite simple. And looking on eBay trying to find a sizing manual and that kind of thing, it's 5, 6, 7 or more pounds. This 99p, free postage. Not complaining. That's going to come in very handy. And I've also spent a couple of minutes this morning cutting my gift box using Dad's tools, which aren't the best, and my skills, which definitely are the best. So I've cut some miters, but even these are going slightly wonky. So there is a bit of, there's quite a bit of sanding that needs doing before I can stick these together. If I had the skills and technology, I'd put splines in to strengthen it, but the scroll saw is still packed away, so I don't want to get that out, and I'm not entirely sure how I would do that on the scroll saw. So yeah, next bit of this project is to roll the bangles. I'll do the rings later on, and then sort out my gift box. So you don't want to see me sanding or hear me swearing, and I suspect there'll be quite a bit of both. So come back to you when I'm ready to glue up my box. Okay, so I have got this box to a point where I can put it together. It is probably the ugliest box ever, because none of my joints are perfect. I don't think anything's particularly square either, which is, oh well, makes it a bit more interesting, I guess. So it's a fairly ugly box. The wood itself is a pine strip wood, and it's got too strong grain for anything like pyro. But the two pieces, or the pieces I've got for top and bottom, got really quite a nice defined grain on them. So I think I'm going to use that as a feature, hopefully. Whereas the sides, the grain is relatively weak. Again, okay, it's November, and the sycamore tree out back is dropping its seeds, so that's what that is. Right, so yeah, the grain on the side pieces here, which is a slightly thicker wood, is not as pronounced. So I think I'm probably going to end up painting this anyway, because that will hide the filler. So I'm now into the stages of gluing together. So I've taped my pieces together, and these joints are all completely wonky, so I know they're bad. They are very bad. Right, close better. So I'm going to be fairly generous with the glue because I want it to joint. Like that. You can see there is definite air space between the joints, but I can't do much about that now. And because my thinner wood was only 7 centimetres wide, these when I learn how to do a voiceover, this won't be a problem. Right, so I don't mind squeeze out because the inside I'm going to line anyway, so that's not a problem. Nope. Okay, do it that way then. Gravity is not my friend. That's it. So I'm just going to. Not sure how I'm going to do this bit. This is going to be a gluey mess, whatever I do. And then it's going to be it. Okay, so I'm moving on to making the bracelets. Now I've tested out one of my rings, and most of the instructions say that CA glue doesn't stick to nitrile gloves. Yes, it does. Quite a bit. So find a way of protecting yourself. I've realised that masking tape doesn't stick, so I've guarded the appropriate fingers, the ones that actually lost bits of glove, and I've picked out my my mould, or what they call mandrel. I was going to use this coffee jar, but it's got a lip, so whatever I put onto it I'm not going to be able to get off, so never mind. This one is my pin pot. This is my other videos, and one of my bangles is just slightly too small for it, and I think that's about the right sort of diameter for a bangle. So I've done my first one as a tester, and that worked quite well. It's a little bit more tedious than I was expecting, but these things, you know. So 2, 4. I have numbered my 2, 4. I've numbered my layers of veneer here, and what I did before I bent them, I can't remember if I showed that on the video or not, is I sanded the ends, both ends on these, and only one end on the rings, so that they'd kind of transition a little bit easier. But I don't think I got enough of an angle on that, so these aren't quite sitting neatly, but for a first time out I'm not too concerned. So, basic premise, wrap it round and then roll it a couple of times, so that should hopefully get it tight to itself. And then I'm using a thin CA glue somewhere in the middle of the crossover point here, and I'm just going to hold it down, and I've got my finger covered in case the glue comes through the wood, which it did on 1 or 2 of the others. So I'm just going to hold that down for 10 seconds or so, just so it sets, hopefully. If you keep it fairly thin at this point, don't put too much in, that should set. And I'm just making sure that it comes off my jar, that will be interesting if it doesn't. And then moving on to the next layer. I may well have been able to get away with doing these without the soaking part, but I suspect I would have a lot of splintering if I tried, so I think this is probably the better option. So next layer in, let's pull the ring open slightly, and I want to kind of join these where I sanded the edge, so that's kind of the last couple of millimetres here. So I'm just going to stick some glue down and press again with a protected finger along that joint just until it sets and holds in place. With this it's a 10-second cure, but that was a bit thick, so it might take a little longer. So in terms of speed, these you can kind of put them together quite quickly. Oop. Yeah. So you could really do a bit of a set and just keep making and making and making if you feel that way inclined, and if you've got enough CA. So this little pot, 20 grams, then its pot's only less than halfway full. That was about a fiver, so if you can afford that much CA glue then by all means. So I think I can probably make a fair amount with just one pot, so that might be a doable thing in the future. So, rolling it down again to try and move the wood around as tightly as possible. And then a finished state, and I've glued it all the way around on one side here. So once you've got it set into the shape you want to then pump your CA glue around the open edge. Doesn't matter if it seeps down, that's kind of the point. Now I'm doing this on a piece of glass because that seems to be the type of surface that all the other videos I've watched use. Okay, so it's been about 12 hours or so, and this is all stuck and quite solid. It is, as I said, the most ugly box I've ever made. There are cracks, there are uneven bits, but it is good and strong. So I'm going to take my sander to it and try and even out some bits and pieces and roll over the corners, I think, so I can get at least a finished surface on the outside as much as possible. So I'm going to do the first lot of sanding with, that's a 90 grit or 80 grit, and then I'm going to do the filling after I've sanded, because I don't see the point in filling and then sanding it all off and then sanding again. So here goes. Okay, so I resorted to my piece of 40 here to get this down exactly level, but it did tear up quite a bit of the edges, so I've then gone back onto my 60 or 60, no, 60, and just tidied that up slightly. So right now all the layers here are level at this side. The other side I haven't started yet, but best way to do this, because if it's as a ring, there's not very far for the glue to progress really, so you don't need to really keep adding a lot. But with this, I think I will. I'll add another layer of glue just to make sure it's going down here and it's strengthening this edge, because I've got to do a lot more shaping here. So back onto my glass, and I'm just going to work a bead all. Okay, so I've given this a good overall sanding, and I've actually whittled down the top edges and given them a really quite pronounced rollover. Rollover? Oh no, whatever it's called. I don't have a router, so I couldn't do it that way, so I've whittled it and then sanded it. It's still slightly lumpy, which I think I like, because the whole thing is quite rustic looking, and I think in the next stage it's going to become even more rustic looking. So yeah, I've masked off the centre section on the top here, and then just cut in about 2mm from the edge, so that the masking tape just tucks under into the wood slightly, so hopefully the paint won't bleed in too much. So I'm using my really cheap black acrylic, because this is very, very watery, and that's going to kind of be more of a stain than a paint, which I think will be a nice effect. And I want to put it on and then sand it a bit, so it kind of breaks it up a bit. I'm using a scrap of felt. Could use a sponge, but I think this is going to absorb a lot more than a sponge and work more as a spreader than anything else. So I'm just going to work. Okay, so I've had slight problems with this, well not with the box as such, but with everything else. So once painted this, I sanded it back to 120, and that's brought out a lot of the grain detail and also the filler, but never mind. I wanted to go for a rustic look, so I'm going for a rustic anyway, and there's some slight bleed out around where the tape was here, but there was going to be anyway, so that's not a problem. So now I'm working on cutting it in half. So I have wrapped it with tape and then marked my line, which is 4 centimetres up from the bottom. That is fairly square in that direction, but only one of the corners is square in this direction, so that's made it a little bit interesting. So what I'm going to do is, just to start off the cut, make it a little bit easier, is just take my craft knife and just give it somewhere for the blade to grip. And my small disaster was that my cutting board here, I dropped it as I got it off the shelf, and one of the arms stops things came off, and the other one's a little bit wobbly, so this is going to be an interesting experience. The bottom one's solid enough, and I've put a clamp on here just to give it a kind of a right angle to sit in. I don't want to really dent the wood too much, so I'm putting a little bit of fabric in just to protect that. So that should hopefully be good enough. So my new saw, so I hope that this cuts neatly. So I'm starting by just running backwards, just carefully, just so that I can make a trench to work through. Oops. I don't want to build up too much speed, because I know I'm likely to go offline, so I'm just gradually working my way down, adding some speed as I start deeper in. Okay, so it's been a couple of days, and the last time you saw this box I was trying to saw it in half, which was not fun. My cutting board, the support on the back completely sheared off whilst I was trying to saw, and I've managed to cut a lump out of my thumbnail here, so that didn't go particularly well. The only cut I managed to get straight was on the back, the rest all went completely wonky, so I've cut back and rounded over all the inner edges here to match the top. So now I'm going to add some more paint just to kind of cover up the mistake or the design, whichever you want to call it, and then I'm going to think about what I'm going to do on the top, because I think I want to do some carving or something in the top here. So that's an idea that's coming, so I'm just going to add some paint and then move on to that bit. Still got to work out how I'm going to line this, and my bracelet, I have covered the inside with a layer of glue just to set that off, so that needs to be sanded down to 120, and then another layer of glue and the same on the outside before I start doing any drilling or grinding I'm going to do on that one. So yeah, slight dragon shed manicure, which is just kind of part of the course really. I'd never get to grow my nails out particularly long, so I'll be back to you for the next stage. Okay, so I have given this a coat of wax and then rubbed it all back, so it's got a nice finish to it. I've sanded back the tops here so these sit a little lower and they're slightly kind of slanted towards the edges, so the corners aren't quite so sharp. I probably should have given the corners a quick zap before I stuck them on, but never mind. So now I'm sorting out the lining. So I've got a strip of fabric along the bottom here, and I've made up 2 cushions. So I've just folded the fabric around some cotton wadding and just a couple of stitches to hold it in place. So now I need to stick it into the box. Okay, my battery died, so you didn't see what I did here. I put in the pads, the cushion pads here, and I've basically used the other bracelet as a, I don't know what you call it, a block, I guess, to apply pressure so that it sticks on both sides, and then I've just covered the bottom with some felt. So now I'm working on the design on the bracelet, and what I've done here is wrap it with some masking tape just to protect the surface at the minute, and I've marked the opposite side to the join, so I'm working on that side. And I've worked out my pattern here. I was going to do some pyro, but thinking about the super glue on it and adding heat to that, it's going to make it quite unpleasant, so I'm going to carve it instead. So just running some glue onto that, and then lining up the centre of this with the marks here. Okay, so battery seems to be playing up, so I'll do this as quickly as possible. I'm in the process of cutting out the very top layer of this wood, because the next one down is a walnut, so that should have a nice bit of definition. And I've made a hole big enough for a little cabochon. I haven't decided what colour I'm using, but that's that. So I'm going to continue around here and then come back to you for the finishing. So yeah, it's been interesting. I've come off the line a couple of times, but being on top of masking tape, it does protect it to some degree. So we'll see how this goes. So I'll come back to you for the next stage. Okay, so I'm on to the kind of final finishes of this. After I finished the carving, I gave it a really good coating in glue. Unfortunately, my little crystal's gone all foggy. Not quite sure why that did that. Oh well, so I'm just going to take a bit of 180 and just have a quick run around with it, just to pick up any edges. Across the top here. On the whole, this hasn't been too bad a project. I've learnt quite a bit about the process, and I've learnt why people don't tend to do bracelets, why it tends to be rings rather than bracelets. So you really do need to make sure all the layers are perfectly rolled, so it's quite tight. Right, so what I'm going to do is take a brush and a little bit of oil, of wax even, and just rub a little bit in, just to give it that final bit of shine, because I don't think I basically killed a whole bottle of glue, which is not the most financially wise thing to do, as it was about £5 a bottle. So that's kind of probably one reason why people only make rings rather than bracelets. Oh well. So rubbing in the oil to get it into, and the wax even, to get it into all my grooves, and give the crystal a bit of a shine, and a little bit on the inside. So yeah, I did end up filling a little bit around this edge here because of the gaps, but adding glue on top of that stabilised that. But the other one I made, it was very gappy, and once I got it down to a level point, there were so many gaps, there was more gap than the actual bracelet. So this one I'm calling a learning experience, so I'm not going to invest any more glue in that one. I've got one more bottle which I will start to use for rings, I think. So I'm just going to leave this to sit for 20 minutes or so, just to let the wax do its thing and give it a buff, and my box is pretty much finished. Just going to buff over my stars on top. I'm undecided whether I should have painted these and then sanded them back like the rest, but I think this will do the effect I was going for. And the inside pad has kind of formed itself into the shape of the bracelet, which is nice, so that when I put them in and close it, it will hold itself in. So, all I've got to do is wait for the wax to turn